In 1964, more than 12 million Americans belonged to a bowling league. Today, that number has collapsed to under 1 million. But this story is not really about bowling. It is about Saturday night and how an entire generation of American adults built their whole week around a single evening that has now almost completely disappeared. There was a time, not so long ago, when Saturday night was a near sacred event. Men polished their shoes on Saturday morning. Women set their hair on Saturday afternoon. The whole house smelled like aftershave and perfume by 6 o'clock. And by 8, every dance hall, supper club, bowling alley, drive-in theater, and lodge hall in America was full of adults who had been waiting all week for this exact moment. So what exactly were Americans doing on Saturday night that they no longer do? And how did the most important evening of the week vanish without anyone noticing it was leaving? To understand Saturday night, you have to understand what the rest of the week looked like. The American work week in 1960 was longer, more physical, and more rigidly scheduled than anything most people experience today. 6 full days of work was still common. Men came home exhausted Monday through Friday. Women managed households that required hours of daily labor. There was no Netflix to numb the week, no food delivery to skip cooking, no infinite scroll to fill the empty moments. By Friday night, most adults were genuinely tired in a way modern life rarely produces. And Saturday night, by social agreement of an entire nation, was when the country let itself go. It was reward, release, romance, and reunion all packed into a single 5-hour window between supper and midnight. And for 30 straight years, almost every American adult participated in some version of it. The first ritual began before the sun even went down. Across America, in millions of homes from Maine to California, families piled into the car around 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon and drove into town. This was called going to town, and it was its own quiet event. You parked on Main Street, you walked the block, you waved to the same neighbors you had waved to last Saturday and the Saturday before that. The wives went to the dry goods store, the husbands went to the hardware store. The teenagers were given $1 and turned loose at the 5 and dime. By 5:30, the whole family met at the diner for an early supper. It was the universal warm-up to the evening, and it disappeared so completely between 1970 and 1990 that most Americans under 50 have no idea it ever existed. The second ritual was the Saturday night bath. For half a century in this country, Saturday night was bath night, and that phrase meant something very specific. In the era before daily showers became standard, most Americans bathed once a week, and it was always on Saturday. The water was heated on the stove, the tub was filled. The whole family took turns, often in the same water, with the youngest going first and the father going last. The wife laid out a fresh dress. The husband laid out a clean shirt. By 7 o'clock, the entire household smelled like ivory soap and bay rum aftershave, and the adults were ready to be seen in public in a way they had not been all week. The third ritual was the supper club, and it was the crown jewel of mid-century adult nightlife. From the late 1940s through the mid-1960s, virtually every American town with more than 10,000 people had at least one supper club. These were neon-lit roadhouses on the edge of town with red leather booths, a horseshoe bar, a small stage for a live band or a singer, and a full menu that ran from prime rib to lobster thermidor. A supper club. Saturday night was a 4-hour affair. You arrived at 7 for cocktails. You ate at 8. The band started at 9. You danced until 11. You drove home with the windows down. By 1980, 90% of those supper clubs had closed. The buildings still stand in thousands of small towns, repurposed as banquet halls and antique stores, but the world they belong to is completely gone. But the supper club was for the older crowd and those with money. What was the rest of America doing? The answer, on almost every Saturday night for 30 years, was bowling. and the scale of it is hard to believe today. The fourth ritual was the bowling league. At its peak in 1964, the American Bowling Congress and the Women's International Bowling Congress had a combined membership of over 12 million adults. Bowling alleys ran 3 full shifts on Saturday nights. The leagues were the social glue of working class and middle class American life, organized by your factory, your office, your church, your fire department, your neighborhood. You wore matching shirts. You drank pitchers of beer. You smoked Lucky Strikes between frames. You knew the names of everyone on your team and their spouses and their children. The bowling alley parking lot was full from 6 until midnight, and the wait for a lane on Saturday at 8 could run 45 minutes. Today, fewer than 1 in 15 American adults bowls even once a year. The leagues collapsed in the 1990s and never recovered. The fifth ritual was the dance hall, and it changed faces several times across these decades, but never lost its place on Saturday night. In the 1940s, it was the big band ballroom, Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, the Andrews Sisters on the radio, while couples did the jitterbug under a giant mirrored ball. In the 1950s, it was the Rock and Roll Roadhouse, where Bill Haley, Buddy Holly, and Chuck Berry filled rooms with teenagers who had become adults faster than their parents wanted. In the 1960s, it was the Country Dance Hall and the Soul Review. Every single one of these places had one thing in common. They were packed on Saturday night, every Saturday night, with adults aged 21 to 50, dressed up, dancing close, drinking, smoking, and turning a 5-hour window into the highlight of their entire week. The sixth ritual was the drive-in movie. At their peak in 1958, there were over 4,000 drive-in theaters in America. Saturday night was the biggest night of the week. Couples loaded blankets and pillows into the back seat. Families brought sandwiches and paper bags. A double feature meant 4 hours of escape under the stars, with the speaker box hooked onto the car window and a giant screen glowing against the night sky. By 1990, fewer than 300 drive-ins remained in the entire country. Today, the number is under 200, and most of those only operate from May to September. An entire form of American Saturday night entertainment, once attended by over 100 million people a year, simply ceased to exist. The seventh ritual was the Lodge Hall. The Elks, the Moose, the Knights of Columbus, the American Legion, the VFW, the Masons, the Eagles. Every American town had at least 3. Membership across all American fraternal lodges peaked at nearly 25 million adults in the 1950s. Saturday night at the lodge meant a dance, a fish fry, a meat raffle, a euchre tournament, or a wedding reception. The lodges were the working class supper clubs, cheaper, friendlier, organized around brotherhood and community service. Today, most of those lodges are gone or barely functioning, kept alive by men in their 70s and 80s who remember the Saturday nights of their youth and cannot quite let go. The eighth ritual was the neighborhood card game. Pinochle, bridge, canasta, poker, gin rummy. Every Saturday night in millions of American kitchens and living rooms, 4 to 8 adults gathered around a folding table for a card game that started at 8 and ran past midnight. The host rotated each week. The wife made a casserole and a cake. The men drank highballs. The women drank brandy Alexanders or sweet wine. The conversation moved through the week's news, the children's grades, the price of beef, the latest scandal 3 blocks down. Card games like these were the glue of adult friendship in mid-century America, and they have all but vanished from American homes. Most adults under 40 have never played a single hand of bridge or pinochle in their lives. The ninth ritual was the corner tavern, and it deserves its own moment. Every American neighborhood had one. It was where working men stopped on Friday night after the paycheck and Saturday night after dinner. It had a long wooden bar, a back room with a pool table, a jukebox loaded with Sinatra and Hank Williams, and a bartender who knew your drink, your wife's name, and your father's name. The tavern closed at midnight under most state blue laws, which meant Saturday night had a built-in ending. You went home to your wife. You slept in on Sunday. You went to church at 10. The whole rhythm worked because the rules of the week were enforced by the bones of American life. Today, the corner tavern is dying. The ones that remain serve mostly older customers, and the under 40 generation simply doesn't go. The 10th ritual was the most universal one of all. Saturday night television. By the late 1950s, an estimated 75% of American adults who stayed home on Saturday night watched the same 3 programs on 3 networks. The Jackie Gleason Show, then the Lawrence Welk Show, then later the Carol Burnett Show, and All in the Family and the Mary Tyler Moore Show. A single Saturday night episode could draw 50 million viewers out of a population of 200 million. That meant 1 in 4 Americans, including children, was watching the exact same television show at the exact same time. There was nothing fragmented about Saturday night entertainment. The whole country watched together. And on Monday morning, every office in America had the same conversation about what happened on Saturday's show. If you are remembering Saturday nights you grew up with, or wishing you had lived through this era, take a moment to subscribe. We bring back a forgotten piece of American life every week, and these stories disappear faster every year. But how did all of this end? How did Saturday night, the most powerful social ritual in 20th century America, collapse in less than 20 years? The answer comes down to 3 forces that arrived at almost the same time. The first was cable television. By the early 1980s, the average American home went from 3 channels to 30. The shared national Saturday night program ceased to exist. The second was the home video cassette recorder, which by 1985 had reached half of all American households. Suddenly, you could rent a movie on Saturday afternoon and watch it from your couch, and the drive-in, the movie palace, and the entire concept of going out for entertainment lost its monopoly. The third and final force was the smartphone, which by 2015 had completed the job. Saturday night entertainment moved from public to private, from social to solitary, from the dance hall to the device in your hand. And once the migration was complete, there was no reason to put on a clean shirt and drive into town anymore. What Americans lost when Saturday night died was not just an evening of entertainment, it was the weekly architecture of adult community. The supper clubs, bowling leagues, dance halls, lodges, drive-ins, taverns, and card games worked together as a system. They guaranteed that every American adult would see other American adults face to face at least one night a week, dressed up, drinking, dancing, talking, and laughing in the same room. That guarantee no longer exists. The average American adult today spends roughly 6 hours alone on a Saturday night, mostly looking at a screen. The bowling shoes are gone. The supper club is a parking lot. The lodge hall is a real estate office. The card table is in the basement under boxes of Christmas decorations. The whole magnificent infrastructure of mid-century American Saturday night has been dismantled, one ritual at a time, until almost nothing of it remains. And maybe that is the part worth thinking about. Saturday night in 1960 was loud, crowded, slightly drunk, often imperfect, and built on social conventions that we have rightly moved past in many ways, but it gave a generation of adults something modern life rarely provides, a fixed weekly moment when everyone in your community came out of their house at the same time, in their best clothes, looking for each other. That weekly moment did the quiet work of holding entire towns together, and when it disappeared, we lost something the smartphone has never figured out how to replace. The truth is, Saturday night was never really about the bowling or the dancing or the supper club. It was about the unspoken promise that on this one evening, every week, no matter what the world had done to you Monday through Friday, you would not be alone. If this story brought back a Saturday night you remember, or made you wish you had lived through one, hit subscribe and stick around. We bring back a forgotten piece of American life every week. And next time, we are heading back to the kitchen, to a Sunday dinner ritual that disappeared even faster than this one.